Hello, I'm Victoria from Old to Ooh La La. Today we're going to make this darling little gnome tag. It's 3 by 5. We're going to start by using a iron orchid frames mold. Here I'm going to dust with cornstarch. It helps the clay to release. I'd give it a little tap, get out the excess. I do like using the iron orchid air dry clay. I keep mine in the refrigerator so it stays fresh. I need to warm it up between my hands so I can roll it out into a snake. Then I can just fit it around the frame. Now that it's long enough, I can just lay it right in the little place, pushing it in with my fingers. At this point, I like to use my brayer. I find that it really drives the clay down into all of the design, and I get a real good result. Now I'm going to use the micro rim edge and just pull the clay right off and get a nice clean edge all the way around. I'll move to the inside of the frame and do the same thing. They release quite easily. You can bend them a lot. You're not going to hurt it. Go ahead and bend it. Let the mold do the work for you. I generally lay it on my table. As soon as I get it out, I might secure it with one finger and then just roll that mold right back off. Perfect result every time. Now we're going to work on our tag. We need to add a little bit of interest to this tag because it's just plain brown, pretty boring. I like to work with layers. I like to layer one thing over another. So here I've taken just some chalk paint on a chip brush. I've taken a lot of it off, and I'm just not going for full coverage here. I'm just adding a little bit of interest. It almost looks distressed. That's all I'm going to do, that quick. Now I am going to add some distress from the new Vintage Textures Iron Orchid stamp. I'm using stone gray on this. I don't want it to be real dark. I just apply my ink to my stamp. Put it right over the top, secure with one hand, press with the other. Now I've got 2 layers of interest, and that took no time at all. Now we're going to talk about this little image. It's from a napkin, and I've just cut it out in a circle. Napkins have 3 plies. I've taken 1 ply off. This is how to get the last ply off because it can be tough. Put a piece of tape to the back, and it'll just release right off. So now I'm just kind of measuring where I want everything. I take my little gnome and I put little frame over him. What I'm doing is I'm measuring for where I want to put my stamp. We're going to use some typography from a stamp called Merry and Bright. It's a new Christmas stamp from Iron Orchid. And it has just a little bit of verbiage right there that's perfect for this little gnome. So I'm going to take just that piece off. And I'm going to put it on a thin mount that I've cut into pieces to make it easier to use. And just go ahead and attach that to the back. I am going to stamp in black because I want it to be a little more noticeable than the gray that we used before. This stamp has 2 lines. I only want to stamp one line at a time. So I'm going to come in with some rubbing alcohol on a paper towel, and I'm going to take the ink off of one of the lines so I can get a nice clear image with just the part of the stamp that I want. Being careful not to touch the top line. I want to leave all that ink on the top line, but remove all of it from the bottom line. I have a pretty good idea of where I want this. Just kind of hovering over. I'm going to take a pencil and put it underneath there and make just a small pencil tick so I know where to stamp, because I've got to move that frame out of the way. So now I'm committing. Press with one hand, anchor with the other. Got a nice impression. I'm going to do the same with the bottom. Kind of measure everything out. Give myself a little pencil line so I know exactly where to stamp. Those little pencil lines you can just erase. I'm cleaning off my entire stamp now, so I don't have any residue at all. I want to start fresh. I'm going to restamp, and now I'm going to use the bottom portion of the stamp. So using rubbing alcohol on a paper towel, I'm going to take all of the ink off of the top line of the stamp. Move aside my frame. I've got my little pencil line so I know exactly where to. When you erase those pencil lines, be careful not to touch that ink if it's not completely dry. I like a little white eraser, and they don't leave any marks behind. So now I've got my stamping. Now I need to do a little bit of a backdrop for that little gnome to go, and I'm just making some little pencil lines so I know I need to paint that very light. Anytime you decoupage, those napkins are so thin. If it's not pure white, very light behind there, you'll lose a lot of the definition of your decoupage paper. So I'm just coming in with some very light paint. I don't have to be too precise here because the frame will cover the edges of that. But I just want to make sure that there's a nice light place for me to decoupage that little piece of napkin. The little gnome napkins are a little set of 4 different styles that are available in my shop, the oolalashop.com, along with all the Iron Orchid products that you see today. Now I'm going to paint my frame. I'm not too concerned about total coverage. I just want to get kind of a base coat on there because we're going to antique it, so it's really not going to show, but I want to get that stark white kind of gone. I do not want to fill up all the cracks and crevices of the frame with paint, so make sure you're not just filling in those spots. So now this is dried. Somehow my filming went sideways. Don't know how that happened, but we're going to go with it because it's a small part. I'm adding Mod Podge, and I'm just going to attach the top of the napkin real quick. I like to use a little piece of plastic for that. So once that decoupage paper starts to absorb the Mod Podge, it can tear quite easily. If you have plastic, it's easier to manipulate it. I'm just tearing a piece of plastic off of a stamp wrapper. And that plastic will slide real nice over the decoupage. So then now that it's secure, I'll just flip it up and I'll cover that whole white area with decoupage medium. And then take my plastic, make sure it's all secure. I'm going to take some glue. I used a Titebond wood glue for my molds, and I don't use a lot of glue. Less is more, I think, with glue. So I'm getting just a bit on my finger, and I'm going to take it, kind of secure it with my thumb there, and just kind of tap the glue onto the frame. If your frame separates or if it breaks, don't worry about it, because you can glue the edges together, and some little cracking is nice. It kind of gives it character. So if that frame comes apart someplace, don't worry about it, because you're going to lay it on something flat and you can glue the edges together. So now we've got our frame in place over the little piece of decoupage. Now we need to seal before we antique. If you don't seal before you antique, you won't be able to wipe any of the antiquing back. My favorite product to seal with is Polyvine. I'm using a dead flat finish there. Also available in my shop, the oolalashop.com. I use Polyvine to seal everything. So I'm just being careful not to, again, fill up the recessed parts of the frame with product. I don't want to seal it up with, I don't want to let the product pool in there, because what you want to pool in there is the antiquing gel. I'm going to give a coat to my decoupage gnome, and I'm going to go all around the outside and the inside of the frame. And then I'm going to give a light coat to the entire tag. Everything's dry, and now we're going to use Valspar antiquing gel. With a soft brush, what you want to do is cover every bit of that frame. You don't want to see any white. It looks scary, but don't be scared, because although it looks very, very dark, you're going to wipe almost all of that back. And you've already sealed it with the Polyvine, which puts like a shield between the clay and the antiquing gel, so it'll wipe back very easily. Make sure you get all around the inside rim. You don't want any of that white frame to show. And everything's been sealed, so you can wipe it all back. If you get some on the paper, it's not a problem, because you're going to wipe it all back. Now I take a paper towel, I spritz it with some water, get it damp, not sopping wet, just damp. And now I'm gently wiping back. Just the high points. You just want to take that off the high points, and then I kind of push the edges in. So I'm pushing in the edges, and then I'm coming across the top and just gently wiping off the high points. And so that antiquing gel gets all down in the little cracks and crevices and gives you just a beautiful aged result. If you take off too much, you can go add some back on. It stays open for quite some time. You have lots of time to play with the antiquing gel. I'll probably add just a little bit to the face of my tag and then wipe it back because it's sealed too, so I don't have to worry about that. I'll just put a little bit there and just wipe it back just to bring some tone up onto the tag itself. And that's it, it's done. I've added some twine and some ribbon, and here's a supply list.